Hello and welcome back to Principles of Micro with James Bland. In this video I am going to show you an example of a price floor which according to Mankiw's definition, which we're going with at the moment, is a legal minimum on the price at which a good can be sold. I'm just going to say on P there. Okay, so if we're thinking about our supply and demand diagram, if we have a price floor here, then everything above here is okay. Everything down here is illegal. So usually in text, and Mankiw is no exception to this, the classic example of this this kind of price control is the minimum wage. So in the US, we'd be thinking about here as, I think at the moment it is $7.25. If we're in Australia, it would be somewhere around 15 Australian dollars, which was worth a lot more a few weeks ago than it is now. But in the US, minimum wage can vary by state. So, I know that in Ohio it's $8 something, which is where I'm living and teaching. So just like with a price ceiling, which is, the flip side of this, we're going to work through the two cases for a price floor. One of the situations is when the price floor is not binding. Right, so this could be a situation where the minimum wage is $7.25, but someone wants to pay me $20 an hour, and the law has no trouble with that. And there could be some the other situation here is when it is binding, where for some reason employers want to pay their workers, say, $5 an hour, and that is prohibited by law. Okay, so let's start out with the case where it is not binding. Go back up here, get new supply and demand diagram, quantity and price. Okay, so we're going to have a non-binding minimum wage. Here's supply, here's demand. So we're going to start off with our example for a non-binding price floor. So that would be a price floor, so a law that's on the books that says that this good, say labor, cannot be traded for less than a particular value, but that particular value is so low that no one actually is going to trade labor at that price. So an example of that would be if we had a price floor somewhere down here, which means that everything above the floor is legal and everything below the floor is illegal. So in a situation like this, there is nothing stopping the market from trading at the equilibrium price and quantity that we would have had even if the price floor was not there. Okay, so that was a non-binding price floor. Let's have a think about what happens now if we have a price floor that's going to make the equilibrium price illegal. Okay, so to draw this diagram, we'll start again with a standard set of axes and so on. and we are going to have a supply curve and a demand curve. And we're going to put in our price floor up here now. Okay, so a price floor means that it's illegal to trade below the floor. So any price below here is illegal, and anything above the price floor is legal. So let's think about the equilibrium price and quantity that the market kind of wants to be trading at. So that would be, well, here's the quantity, and here is the price. Excuse me, I think that loud thump was my 8-year-old upstairs. And here's the problem, right? People, the market wants to be trading at this price, but that's in the illegal part of the graph. The price needs to be somewhere up here. The question is, how is the market going to resolve this? What trades happen, and what do we end up with? Okay, so we know we can't get a price below the price floor. What happens if we get a price strictly above the price floor, somewhere, say, around here? Well, that's a very high price on this diagram. And so if we have a very high price, then we know that not many consumers are going to want to buy the good. If we're thinking about labor markets, this is not many firms are going to hire people. And on the supply side, everyone on the face of it seems very happy. All right, so on the supply side, a lot of people want to sell at this price. So in a labor market, this is a lot of people want to work at a very high wage, or you could think about this as people want to work a lot of hours if the wage is very high. Okay. Now, this is above the price floor, so it's a legal price, but it's not going to be the price that the market ends up at, because in a situation like this, there are going to be some people who are willing to work for a little bit less, these ones in here, and there are going to be some firms who are willing to hire for a little bit less, and so these firms will bid down the price. And so it's going to arrive at the point where, whoops, I'm going to have to put my supply curve back in there, excuse me. Going to arrive back at the point where the price can't go down any further. So essentially, if we have a binding price floor, which is what this is, binding price floor, then the price is going to be pinned down by the price floor. So what do we get? How much do buyers want to buy? So in a labor market, this is firms hiring workers. Well, we look at the intersection of the demand curve and the price floor, and we get this point here, which means this is our quantity demanded. And on the supply side, this is workers selling their labor to firms. This is going to be our quantity supplied. So we have quantity demanded less than quantity supplied. So this distance here is going to be a surplus. Okay, not in a consumer and producer surplus like we're going to deal with later, but a surplus in the sense that sellers want to sell more at this price than buyers want to buy. Okay. So who in this market is going to end up buying and selling the good? So if we're thinking about a labor market, which buyers, so those are firms, which buyers are going to end up hiring people, and which sellers, that's people, which people are going to end up with jobs. Okay, so typically we assume that, or we could argue that through the rationing process, through rationing processes such as queuing up or engaging in other wasteful activities, the firms that end up with these workers, the ones that have the highest values for hiring those workers, right? So if you've got two companies and they have to pay their workers at least $10 an hour, but one values their work at $11 an hour and one values them at $12 an hour, then the one who values them at $12 an hour is going to be willing to do more work to hire that person. So the firms that end up with the workers are going to be the ones with the highest values around here. Okay, around here. But we have a whole lot of workers. Say these workers here are the ones that might end up with work, but we've got a whole lot of workers here who actually don't end up with any work, right? Because we've only got this many jobs available at this artificially high price. Okay, so what we have is this quantity here, right, quantity demanded, is going to be, in a labor market, the number of people who are employed. And this surplus is going to be the number of people who want to work but can't find a job. Okay, and so this is what we usually think about as unemployment. So what the model is telling us at the moment is that a minimum wage, that is a binding price floor, is going to cause some unemployment. But with a lot of these supply and demand models, we can be reasonably sure that there may be some unemployment, but the model isn't really telling us how much unemployment there will be. So just to finish up, I'd like to show you two examples that could demonstrate, a situation where we get a lot of unemployment or not much unemployment. So what I've done here is I've drawn just the supply curves, and I'm going to show you two different demand curves. And like a lot of examples that are going to come ahead of this, it's going to depend on the elasticity. Okay, so let's start out with a relatively inelastic demand curve, which is going to look something like, like this. Okay, in this situation, the market wants to trade here, but the price floor makes this illegal, but we only get a little bit of unemployment. Okay, let's draw another demand curve on the other graph with the same equilibrium price, but now let's have a relatively elastic demand curve. So this is going to be flatter. This is going to look something like this. Okay. So here we have much more unemployment. And so, the question of, does a minimum wage cause unemployment? Well, we've got a theory that says yes, it will, but the theory at this point doesn't say by how much. And there's a lot of work in econometrics and labor economics going into estimating, the elasticity of demand and other things like that to try to answer these sort of questions. And I may post a few links on this later. Thanks.